Okay, so this week the title is Shipwrecked. As we get closer to the end, you'll understand why. So Shavuot's nearly here. As a distinct sound grows louder and louder in the distance, and the anointing flames are being kindled in the heavenlies. The sound is the distinct call of Yahweh's shofar. It's a call to arms, to stand strong and united as his real body. And it's followed by another sound for us to break out of the tradition camp, get onto our feet and raise our identifying banners. No hiding away. We're to proclaim who we are and who we belong to. And our identifying banner is the Lion of Yehudah. And you'll see it on the Jerusalem flag over on the wall over there. That's the Lion of Yehudah. It's the flag of Jerusalem. So we lift up our identifying banner and we follow the cloud of Yahweh's presence by day and the fire of his presence by night, in the direction that he's showing us and he's leading us. We need to respond to those times, or we will continue like so many others to be left behind in the wilderness. A lot of people have been left behind in the wilderness because they wouldn't move on. The cloud raised up, the cloud moved on, and they stayed where they were because it was comfortable. Left in the wilderness, small groups huddled together in traditional isolation, lost in time, with no hint of the way forward anymore. These people are spiritually malnourished. They get a little bit of fast food, but they never sit down to a proper meal. And they're still clinging desperately to the dry bones of myths and legends. They're remnants from the past, still following that same old, faded, counterfeit traditions. They're still in Egypt, they're still in denial, still pretending to themselves and others that don't know any better, that what they are doing and what they are promoting is the real deal, the real inheritance. For far too long, these isolated groups have been splintering, splitting and infighting, driven by a complete lack of unity. Yet they claim to have all the answers, and yet they still have nothing to do with one another. Completely oblivious to the fact that they are meant to be an encouraging, unified part of a much larger body. They're like the isolated pockets of marine creatures. You know, the little crabs and the fish and the shellfish that sit in the little rock pools at low tide. And they sit there in their little isolated rock pools at low tide. And they focus only on the little watery universe that they've created for themselves within that little rock pool. And because it's small enough, they control it completely. But, beloved, the tide will change sooner or later. And when it does sweep in with a roar, they will suddenly discover just how completely set in their ways and small-minded they've become. Because suddenly they will be surrounded by thousands of others who, just like them, will have to come to terms with the original blueprint, which was not for rock pools. It will form a new reality for them as they desperately have to learn to swim in the same direction together to survive. Mishpocha, family, the tide is already turning. It's already coming back in, ready or not. Can you hear the roar of the waves? The tide has turned. Can you hear the waves as they approach? And this approaching change will either be terrifying or exciting, depending on whether you fight it or go with the flow. You can fight the tide, but you can't stop it. So some people will be terrified and try to fight it. But some people will recognise where the tide's coming from and they'll go with it. Israel was in exactly the same position in the wilderness and felt exactly the same way, as many of them looked longingly back to the good old days. How many people do you know that want to go back to the good old days? Unfortunately, they forget about the bad old days that came along with it. So they look longingly to the good old days in Egypt, preferring to see their old life through the rose-coloured spectacles of a denial-soaked past. And as they used that old favourite, better the devil you know. How many times I heard that, and I think, boy, if only you knew what you were saying. Guess who thought up of that phrase? Better the devil you know strategy. And if they do have to go forward, they move forward reluctantly, kicking and screaming all the way, driven by a complete fear of the future. Because they have that complete fear of the future and they're insecure, they continue to look backwards to what they knew instead of forwards to what they need to know. And what they need to know is that the promise given by Yahweh was to prepare a place for them and to give them an inheritance. And that's His promise to us today, to prepare a place for us, to provide us with an inheritance. And He should be completely trusted. But before they can come to that place of inhabiting the promise, they must be formed into a Kehillah, a community capable of inhabiting the land that's been promised to them. It wasn't waiting for the land to be ready for them. He was waiting for them to be ready for the land. And in our case, He's not waiting for what He has prepared for us. He's waiting for us to be ready for what He's prepared for us. And however long that takes is up to us. Why aren't I moving any faster? Because you're not doing what you're told. But I'd like to do it now. You're not ready for it now. If you go in there now, you'll wreck it, you'll spoil it, and you'll fall flat on your face. And in 40 years' time you'll turn and say, yeah, I tried it once and it didn't work. And you'll become cynical. Oh yeah, I prayed once and I didn't get what I wanted. We need to be a community capable of inhabiting the land promised to Abraham Avinu and his descendants. And to do that, we must stop looking back. If you're moving forward and you next turn around and you're looking back, guess what's going to happen? At some stage you're going to go because you're looking that way instead of that way.
Not why.
Yeah. And if you stand still and look backwards, the car's going to hit you. We must stop looking back. He says that if we look back, we're not fit for the kingdom. Why do people keep looking back? Because they're desperately searching for plan B. I've got good news and bad news. The good news is there is only plan A for us. The bad news is there is no plan B. Plan B is the enemy. All we have to do is follow plan A and obediently follow directions. We just need to trust that the person giving those directions to us can be trusted based on past experience. The more we spend time with Him, the more we learn to trust Him, the more we will trust Him in bigger situations after trusting Him in small ones. I think I've told you before, Pamela used to have a little magnetic thing that stuck on the glove box of my car, and it said, those that want to move mountains must first move little foothills. So we need to learn to move little foothills first before he gives us a mountain. Abba always has and always will continue to guide us as he provides for all of our needs. Not necessarily our wants, not necessarily our greeds, but our needs. And he knows our needs better than we do. How many of you think, I know my children's needs better than they do? They might want something, but I know it's not going to be good for them. A parent is only interested in the children's needs. And occasionally their wants. But the needs come first. He provides for all of our needs, both physically and spiritually, enabling us to successfully navigate our way through this barren wilderness of conflicting choices and confusing voices. Everywhere there are voices trying to divert us away from the truth and coerce us into an endless spiral of myths and legends and man-made theories. And all of those things always lead to dead ends. They have them a lot in America. I don't think they have them so much here. But in America they have what they call box canyons. And you go in and there's no out. And all of these things lead to box canyons. We go into them and there's no way out. There's just a big wall in front of us. When they went across the water with Moshe, he brought them to a place where there was no way back. There was no way to the side. The only way was forward, but there was a lot of water in front of them. And often he brings us to that situation and we think, oh no, he's going to destroy us. Why on earth did you bring me to this place? And he's saying, do you trust me? Because sometimes he has to bring us to a place where we can't go back, we can't go sideways, but if we trust him, he'll open up the water. And he'll let us walk through on dry land. But we have to trust him for that to happen. Wouldn't you have thought that a group of people that had had that happen to them would trust him a bit more than they did in the wilderness? People have short memories. Without the navigating gift of discernment, because that's what discernment is. Discernment is like a sat-nav. It's what guides us and says, go left, go right, go straight. Go around the roundabout, do not pass go, do not collect. Discernment is based on absolute truth. And unless we navigate with discernment, we will continue to crash and burn again and again and again. Without that inner ear to hear what the Ruach HaKodesh is saying to us, the Spirit of Truth, as part of the body of Yeshua, we will fail miserably. So many people crash, so many people fail because they're not using discernment, they are not listening to that inner ear. Because the Spirit of Truth promises that He will guide us into all truth. No box canyons. But if we don't listen to Him, we will fail miserably and will become hopelessly lost and confused, just like everybody around us. And the sad thing is most of them don't even know they're lost. If nobody tells them, how will they know? And what we need most is the boldness, the will, and a 100% desire for change. People hate change. People don't like change. Makes them feel insecure. But we need change. We need to move forward when He tells us to move forward. I suspect that if they had to stay for a year sometimes, it's because He had a lot to learn them and they wouldn't listen. They wouldn't learn it. But the overnighters, they were obviously doing quite well. So sometimes if you feel like the cloud's been over you for about a year, maybe there's something you need to ask him and say, what do I need to learn? What do I need to do to move on? We need to become servant leaders. I've got news for you. There is no such thing as a layman in the kingdom. No such thing as clergy, no such thing as layman. We are all, in that sense, clergy. We are all priests. We are all ministers. We are all leaders at different stages of expertise and tuition. And we need boldness. We need to be servant leaders. Just like King David was a servant leader, with an unflinching willingness to stand our ground. And to do that, we need to trust unconditionally. We need to love unconditionally. And we need to forgive unconditionally. And people will say that's not possible. And I'll say, unless you do those things, love is not possible. And we need to do it while continually moving forward without a single glance backwards. Does it mean we're not allowed to deal with things in the past? No. We need to deal with them, but then move on. We deal with them, but we don't keep looking back at them. So we stand our ground. We trust unconditionally. We love unconditionally and forgive unconditionally. No strings, no puppets. As we continue to move forward without a single glance backwards, united totally in and through Yahweh, and following Him and only Him, as reborn, restored citizens of His kingdom, who boldly move forward as we navigate His way and keep up with His presence and focus only on His direction day and night. In the bright times, in the dark times, we still focus on Him and we still move. If you're receiving this message deep into your spirit today, it's because you are uncompromisingly searching for the truth and nothing but the truth. And you're receiving this message because as a servant leader or a servant leader in waiting, you have already responded to the call. And you can clearly hear the shofar calling or you wouldn't be here. And you can clearly hear the shofar calling the rest of the body together to be ready, able and willing as co-labourers to fulfill Yeshua's commandments to His followers. His Talmudim. And the call is to complete the task given by Him to all redeemed followers. To teach every inhabitant of every nation to do what? To listen? Yeah, but no. To preach? No. To memorize scripture? No. To change Yahweh's day of rest from Shabbat to Sunday? No. To follow man-made rules and traditions? No. To build a network of huge brick and concrete religious buildings to be passed down from father to son like franchises set up around the global empire? No. To be a philanthropic organisation like Rotary and Lions and Masons, etc., set up as a social club to benefit its members and distribute benevolent charity to those uncivilized losers who are less fortunate and don't really deserve it anyway. Sounding like Trump. No. What we have actually been commanded and commissioned to do is to come alongside people. Not above them, not below them, but to come alongside people, to all people from all nations, irrespective of colour, class or gender, or any other man-made labels that people can put on each other. Do not accept labels for yourself and do not put labels on people. It's not part of the kingdom living. A person is a person, not a label. And our job is to teach them all of Torah. So how do we do that? By our own example. Totally immersing them into the reality of kingdom living. How? By example. What's the best way to learn a language? Total immersion. When we first learnt sign language, no voice, no lips moving. It was total immersion. We had to learn. Learning Hebrew, Ruth was saying, when she went to the Ulpan in Israel, there was no English. It was just total immersion. It works. You want to be a part of the kingdom? Total immersion. You can't just stand there with your nose at the glass and look in and think, that looks interesting. That looks nice. I might just go in there one day. Look at all those people with all their quaint ways of doing things. A lot of people are stood there with their noses onto the glass looking in, but they're not yet ready to come in. All of you people have got past the glass, and that's great. So how do we do it? By example. Showing them how to obey everything He's shown us. Personally. And showing them personally what He's commanded us to do. How? By example. How? By showing and telling them the truth and nothing but the truth. Refusing to compromise. And completely rejecting anything and everything that isn't an integral part of the truth. How? By example. But of course, people will say, oh, you're just an idealist. You must be realistic and not so retro and old-fashioned. I mean, after all, this is the 21st century. It's an era where people are very open-minded and flexible. And we accept all of the differences, just not yours. Isn't that amazing? Anybody can do whatever they like, and they accept all of their differences, just not ours. They say you have to follow our laws and be inclusive and bow down to society's norms. Well, my answer to that is, on my Hebrew calendar, it's the year 5776, or the 64th century. I don't follow some glorified papal Roman timetable that follows their decreed days and their decreed customs. Secondly, I cannot and will not adapt, compromise, or be open-minded about anything but the truth. Truth doesn't have a best by or a use by date. It either is or it is not. What I can do and will do, however, is to continue to accept the real truth and follow it where and when I'm guided by the Ruach HaKodesh, who's the Spirit of truth. He's a trustworthy comforter sent to us from the Father of truth, Yahweh Elohim. Isn't it interesting that He said the command was, go out and teach people in all nations everything that I've commanded you and teach them the truth. And guess what comforter He sends us? He could have sent any spirit. What He sent us was the Spirit of truth. Just exactly what we needed to do the job. I will not follow human philosophy or human theories or any other human inventions, but I will follow my Rabbi, my teacher, Yeshua HaMashiach. If anybody comes up to you, particularly a Jewish person, and says, who's your rabbi? Turn around and say, Yeshua HaMashiach. And they'll run away, but they'll hurt. Never know, they might not run away. Simply means, who's your teacher? My teacher is Yeshua HaMashiach. So I will follow my Rabbi, my teacher, Yeshua HaMashiach, to the ends of the earth and beyond if necessary. Why? Because I spend time with him and I trust him completely. And because of that, give him complete freedom to change my mind. And lots of times he needs to change my mind, because I won't. You know, the times when you change, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. The times when you fall flat on your face, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. So I give him complete freedom to change my mind and delete all the false data that's been programmed into my brain. What we forget sometimes is it's like a computer. All the stuff that's sitting in there, somebody programmed it in. Somebody put it in there. It didn't start out in there. We didn't start out with all this information. We didn't start out with all of these put-downs. We didn't start out with all this rubbish ways we look at each other and look at ourselves. We didn't start out with that stuff. Somebody put it in there. Somebody programmed it into our lives. And we need to let him clean it out. We need to let him hit the delete button. And clean out all the piles of rubbish that's been accumulated over the years. Replacing them with the truth. He never cleans something out. He never takes anything away without replacing it with something else. Because if he doesn't replace it with someone else, guess who's going to come in and fill up the empty space? Of course, none of this is an instant process. The trouble is, we've been led to believe that come forward and pray and poof, it's all finished with, it's all done. Sometimes that happens. But a lot of the time, we need to take time and we need to learn and we need to let him mould us and guide us. And sometimes it's a step-by-step slow process. It's not always instant. We live in an instant world, so we want everything instant. But we actually lose the blessings of the journey to get there. How many years did it take you to get to where you are? So therefore it's going to take a bit of time to change it. So it's an uncomfortable project at times, and I am definitely one of his ongoing projects. But he's provided me with a faithful guide through the process, who constantly blocks and stops me from putting my theories forward. There's times when I'm really glad that you haven't heard some of my theories and only heard his theories. No, his truth. Nobody wants to hear my theories because that's all they are, just theories. And causes me to only speak what I hear from him. Remember, Yeshua said, I don't say anything to you, only what I hear from the Father. And we need to follow that exact same process. Stop speaking what we think people need to hear. Stop speaking what we think we want to say to them. Because our emotions will get in the way, our humanness will get in the way. We need to listen to him and speak only exactly what he tells us to speak. Nothing else will bring life. Nothing else will bring restoration. Nothing else will have everlasting, eternal benefits. The more I can hear clearly, the more I can share clearly. We need to have that inner ear, that ear to hear what He's saying. We need to have that discernment, because unless we hear clearly, we can't speak clearly. We come in prayer and we turn and say, well, I've given them half the message, but I missed out on the other half. Can you give it to me again? So the more I can hear clearly, the more I can share clearly. And as a safety valve, the people I speak to, you are specifically commanded by Him to check out everything I say with Him. Changes things, doesn't it? All the people we speak to are commanded in His Word to go directly back to Him and check out everything I've said. And if I'm wrong, then come and tell me, because I need to learn as well. It means I haven't heard Him clearly. And sometimes I'll say something that doesn't mean what I want it to mean. What I say is not necessarily what you hear. So if there's any confusion, talk to me. So you're commanded by Him to check it all out directly with Him, enabling Him to either confirm or deny. But sometimes the truth can be hard to swallow, particularly when you've been taught something else by someone else that you've loved and respected. But remember, the thing with people is, including me, including you, is we can only take people as far as we've been. I can't give you something that I haven't heard. I can't give you something I haven't learned. So people can only take you as far as they've been personally. They can only teach and pass on what they believe and have learnt from others. So pray for them to be set free and open to fresh revelation directly from the throne, and not from some humanistic lecturers at a seminary or Bible college who are still following their own plans based on counterfeit 1600-year-old humanistic replacement theology agendas. Am I criticising the people? No. I'm just saying they only know what they know. They can only tell you what they've been taught. But they've been taught untruths. They've been taught the wrong things. So we need to pray for them, for fresh revelation for them. For them to be set free by the truth. If it's the truth that sets you free, guess what the other stuff does? You're in bondage. So if it's not the truth, we are just like those first messianic emissaries, or apostles as they're called. We are the ones rocking the boat. And people don't like people who rock the boat. We make people feel uncomfortable and threatened, inside and outside of the church and the synagogue. Why? Because they feel that we're trying to undermine their foundations, because we're saying something different to the foundations that they've got. You tell somebody something that you know is the truth, and you see by their face it's like, I'm going to defend this to the end. You're trying to take away my foundation. You're trying to take away the truth. And all you can do is just tell them the truth and pray for them. You can't convince them. You're never going to talk them into it. In fact, the more you try and talk them into it, the more they'll defend it. But the actual truth is that we're not trying to take away their foundation. We're actually trying to replace the shifting sand within those foundations and replace it with solid rock before the sand is washed away completely and the whole thing comes tumbling down. People will say, well, how do you know it's sand? I know it's sand because I've been there. I've lived there in the past, and I've felt the sand shift. And because of that revelation, I'm now rock-based. And it's so much better being rock-based. You can feel the difference. The ground doesn't shift under you every time there's a tremor. We need to earthquake ourselves. Earthquake-proof ourselves. How do I know it's sand? Because I've lived on it. I've lived in the past. I've been where they are. And I've felt it shift. And because of that revelation, I'm now rock-based. And I can feel the difference. And believe me, it does not feel at all the same. In actual fact, it feels more and more secure as we continue to stand on our firm ground after every storm. Instead of things getting shakier after every storm, the ground seems firmer and more rock solid after every storm. It's kind of like this little parable that I wrote a couple of years ago, and I've sort of modified it a little bit. It's a parable about a tourist group who were cruising the upper reaches of the river. And this river was deemed by them to be sacred. And it was a beautiful sunny day, the birds are singing, and the ancient pilgrim boat is magnificent, fully equipped with every available device. They were surrounded with absolute luxury, dining on the finest of food and drink, or they thought it was. They were feeling content and complacent on this idyllic, tranquil trip away from the daily grind. You know, the once-a-week trip. Many of them are being led in singing traditional boat choruses. Then suddenly this very rude, loud voice comes from the riverbank and disturbs and interrupts this mass euphoria. And the voice comes from a stranger who obviously wasn't one of them. And using a large megaphone, he shouts, "Please save yourselves. Get off the boat quickly, you're in danger from a massive waterfall up ahead." At first they were stunned and everyone sneered at him, laughing out loud. Particularly the trusted and much revered captain of the boat. "Who do you think you are? Disturbing and frightening my passengers with such a patently ridiculous story. I am the most qualified mariner on this river, with years of training and experience. Look at my plaques, look at my certificates, look at my qualifications. I have never ever heard or seen a waterfall on this river, and there certainly isn't one marked on all of my beautifully illustrated sacred charts." But still the stranger persists and asks him if he has personally ever been this far along the river before. "Of course not. This is a special centennial trip to celebrate 2,000 years of tradition on this river. My charts were drawn up by the original designated master mariners thousands of years ago, when the Order of the River was founded by them." Yet again the stranger pleads with him, explaining that he too was once a member of the River Order, and that he's the sole survivor of a boat that went over the falls years before. Every single person on board perished except for him. Why? Because he realised what was happening and he abandoned the ship and jumped before it went over. Absolutely furious, the captain denied that any such tragedy had ever taken place and just called him an ignorant layman. "I don't believe you for a minute," said the captain. "Just look at how calm the water is. Look how sturdy my magnificent boat is. How dare you even think about challenging the mighty river authorities? Just go away, you uneducated, ridiculous little man, and leave it in my expert hands. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone to enjoy the rest of the cruise in peace." But still the stranger persisted and yet again pleaded with him and the passengers. "Sir, I have dedicated my life to warning others about the hidden dangers of this river and the need to follow a different river. I receive no reward other than the satisfaction of saving as many lives as possible from this inevitable disaster. Unfortunately, this is my final warning. You all have only a short time to turn to shore and disembark before the increasingly strong traditional current starts to sweep you towards certain and absolute destruction. But of course his voice was drowned out as all of the laughter and the singing just got louder and louder as the passengers jeered at him and insulted him from the boat, even throwing bottles and food at him. And the captain just turned his back on him and shunned him completely as he continued to lead the passengers in yet another rousing, well-known river chorus. A short while later, the sound of heart-rending screams and crashing, breaking timber could be heard for miles around. And the stranger, he just wept, quietly and uncontrollably, while he waited patiently for the next boat. And I wrote that to describe how I feel sometimes. As a former passenger myself who jumped ship just in time, I know exactly how the stranger feels. I also have been on other boats. And I've watched loved ones crash over the falls as they sang the praises of the consecrated captains and the sacred vessels, cruising the sacred river as they went down. My solution? I have discovered an even more ancient and profoundly different vessel, captained by a master mariner who not only designed the boat itself, but has paid the passengers' fares in full. And he guides us along a long-ignored and forgotten beautiful waterway with absolutely no hidden rocks or dangers. And also I'm called by him to the task of warning people to change rivers and change vessels while they still have time. To reject the teaching of the ignorant, inexperienced, poorly trained skippers who, even after hearing the truth, reject it and still arrogantly set sail, with yet another naive, trusting group of passengers taking them over the falls as they utter those immortal but infamous last words as they go down. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Instead of the true statement, which is trust him. He knows what both he and we are doing. Yahweh is our captain, our Abba, our Heavenly Father. So shalom, shipmates, shalom.